Welcome everybody. This is SharePoint Power Hour. This is a show that we do weekly on Wednesdays at 11 Central. And Power Hour it's sponsored by Rackspace. I'm Laura Rogers, and these are my coworkers on my team at Rackspace. What is Power Hour all about? It is a free show that we do, this live streaming show every week where we demonstrate things in SharePoint. So we are not programmers, and we are not going to get heavy into like server admin specifics and PowerShell and things like that. So most of the topics that we cover are things that you can do in SharePoint and Office 365 out of the box. There are a ton of different topics that we've done. I think this is our 40th or 50th episode or so that we've covered over the past year or so. Things like workflows and forms and user adoption and BI and web parts and just all kinds of neat stuff like that. So, again, I'm Laura Rogers, SharePoint MVP, Rackspace hosting. My background is in server administration, but I moved more towards working with SharePoint's out-of-the-box functionality. I think that's more enjoyable than backups and logs and stuff like that I used to do. And I'm going to go through the rest of the team and have everybody introduce themselves, and then Stephen is going to go last because Stephen has a cool demo to do on the Search Center. So Stephen actually there is a part 1 to this. If you go to our YouTube channel and you go to just the playlist of all the Power Hours that we've done, there's a part 1 where Stephen talked about the Search Center in SharePoint and Office 365, and this is going to be like the part 2, which is just more advanced stuff, cool stuff you can do with Search. Search is awesome. So we'll go Ryan, then Tavis, then Tanya, then Stephen, and I'm looking at you guys at the bottom of my screen trying to figure out what order to go in. But and then Stephen will introduce himself and get started. So here we go. Take it away.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Ryan Keller. I am the branding guy on the business solutions team for SharePoint here at Rackspace. My job is to make SharePoint look not like SharePoint. Been doing that for a little over 3.5 years now, and done a couple of presentations on kind of getting started with branding and kind of migrating some branding from 2010 to 2013. So hopefully in the future we'll see some more additional branding topics. So again, I'm Ryan Keller, and that's that.
Awesome. My name is Tavis Lovell. I am a business intelligence developer on the business solutions team, so I handle all things kind of BI inside of SharePoint and SQL Server, things like dashboards and reporting services reports, all that good type of stuff. And that is all.
Tanya, I think you're next.
Hi, I'm Tanya Kaiser, a 2-year record, new to Laura's team. So getting started with SharePoint, I'm the SharePoint administrator for our internal Rackspace farm.
Oh, another real quick thing before Stephen gets started, we do have a Q&A panel here. So if you're watching on a Google Hangout, you should see it, and if you were watching this live on YouTube, you should see a little button that's got a little, right on our video, that's got a link to take you over to the Google Hangout to be able to see the Q&A panel. But I just tried to open it up, and it actually gave me a Google 500 error, so I don't know. We're also kind of at the mercy. We're at the mercy of the cloud, and that is a lot of people's lives lately, isn't it? So we're at the mercy of the cloud. I don't know, maybe the Q&A is down, but I got an error when I tried to go to it. But that's what we usually use to ask questions. There's also, if that doesn't end up working, we do have the comment area on the YouTube video where you can ask questions, but the whole point of having this as live streaming is for people to be able to interactively ask questions as we go. Take it away,
I think
Stephen.
the QA is working for me. So.
Oh, good. Okay. Awesome.
Hello, everybody. My name is Stephen Wilson. I am an infrastructure specialist here at Rackspace, working on the business solutions team. I have been digging into search lately with SharePoint a little more deeply than I had in previous versions because there's a lot more to dig into. So some of what I'm going to show today is about search, and then some of it's lessons that I learned while I was trying to set up some of the demonstrations, just to give you an idea of some of the thoughts that you have to go through to get the most out of some of the pieces that are available through search. There's a question here, Javier Barrera. Oh, great. Now we're getting hecklers from inside of Rackspace. So yes, I see your question, Javier. So I will go ahead and share my screen. Give me just a moment here. Okay, can everybody see the screen okay?
Yep.
Yes? Okay, good. All right, so when we talked about search earlier, I had a little bit of an area set up where I had done some conversations with users. I had uploaded some files, and we had done some basic searching for content. So if I go in to our search and I look for crime, I'm going to see a bunch of returned items. I can see everything, things that have to do with just people, conversations between people, and in this case we didn't have anything, and videos about crime or that have crime somehow attached to them. And again, we don't have anything in this point. So when I go back to everything, one of the lessons that I learned while we were doing these demos, if you'll notice, this is an image. Crime scene, images JPEG, image res JPEG. But I noticed that if I search for something that was in an image library, I would get the images to come up. So this is something that you have to think about when you're putting your content into SharePoint. Everything about SharePoint search is driven by how it categorizes the information. So content types, result sources, display templates, all those things work together to show you the information as you've put it into SharePoint. So I made probably some mistakes here when I put a bunch of images into SharePoint, and I put them in an asset library instead of in an image library. So they don't show up as images. I can look for them as images. I can look for image types, like I can put like file type JPEG, and I think that will come up. That's a property. No, that doesn't. Some file types won't show up and some file types will. So if I do file type docx, it will. Unfortunately, it can be kind of spotty. So you have to test those things before you start using them in production. The reason this became important to me was because I was trying to set up a demo for everyone to show the content search web part. And the content search web part is similar to the content query web part. It does the same kinds of things, but the big difference is it uses the search index instead of going through SharePoint every time you load it. So this page actually has 3 content search web parts on them. And if I reload the page, it barely blinks. But if I were to do this same thing for a page that had the content query web part, the query would have to run 3 times every time somebody loaded the page. The same thing happens here, but it goes through the search index. This is a lot more efficient for SharePoint and much less of a load on your servers. The reason it's so much less of a load is because it's already indexed, it's in a database already, and it doesn't have to be done off of live data every time. This is both good and bad. The reason it's bad is because this information doesn't get updated until I do a search crawl. So I go into my Show Me library here. And right now, I've got Search, Browser, CMS. If I change one of these items, and I stop editing, I refresh the page just to make sure my edit took, and I go back to the front page, and I refresh the page, you'll see my search doesn't change. If it were a content query web part, it would change because it would be doing a fresh query. I just saw a question pop up, but it said, do you find that your queries are, and then a quotation mark. So I don't know what the end of that question was. So in this case, it didn't update it because I haven't updated search yet. If I go into my search application, my search service application in Central Administration, and because this is kind of a low-powered farm, I don't have it set up to do scheduled crawls, but I'm going to go ahead and kick off the search here. I do find, someone asked if I find that most users are okay with the delay because of the content query search web part. I do. Most users are okay with it because, in my case, I don't have my farm set up to do a scheduled crawl every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes. But in most production farms, the data is only going to be out of date by the length of the search crawl. So if you're doing an incremental search crawl every 20 minutes, chances are the data in those queries aren't going to be more than 20 minutes out of date. And sometimes only be 10 minutes out of date. If somebody looks for something, and it's 10 minutes since the last search crawl, it's only 10 minutes out of date. In 10 more minutes, the crawl's going to run again. So most of the time, the really immediate results aren't super important, given the benefits.
I'm gonna interject real quick. The only kind of situations that I've seen people complain about this, it's usually revolves around having a task assigned to you or having like something actionable that you're supposed to be doing, and seeing a filtered list of in the search web part of stuff that you're supposed to be working on, and immediately when you complete that task, people expect it to go away. So those are the situations where people kind of get upset when it doesn't immediately go away. But yeah, they could just learn. It could just be a training thing, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, that is a conversation to have when you set it up in the first place. So you'll have to show them, okay, it doesn't work, or it does work. And for some reason, you seem to be stuck on my screen, Laura.
Sorry, the tiara. I blame the tiara.
It may be the tiara. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone else wasn't sitting there looking at you when I'm cycling through the screens. Or I could just sit and let your tiara bounce around and everybody just watch it for about a half an hour.
As soon as I stop talking each time, when I see it, I see your screen. So I'll double check it on the YouTube, but that's what it looks like. So I'm gonna mute myself again.
No problem. Okay, so I kicked off my search crawl. It's not done yet, but it may have gotten to my search term, and it did. So you can see now the search engine change is apparent. So it does have that one minor drawback or major drawback depending on what you're trying to apply it to. But it can help out a lot with the performance of the farm. So too many content query web parts, or especially complex content query web parts, can cause a lot of performance problems. The search query web part can cut way down on that. The other difference with the content query web part, you can see that each one of these looks a little different in some way. Well, they're all querying the same information. The only difference between them is that I have set the display template to be different between them. So if I go into this query web part, you can see that I'm using the slideshow display template. And these two, one of them is using list, and then one of them is using a modified template that I created to show a couple of things about the display templates themselves. There are several of these supplied by Microsoft. By default, if I choose this, I will have list with paging, and slideshow. List 2, List EX, and Slideshow 2 are all display templates that I have made experimenting around with things. To make a new one is pretty easy. All you have to do is map a drive to the master page library, which I've done here, and then upload a new template. So if I go into display templates,
That's crazy dev stuff you're doing there, Steven.
no, it's not, and I'll show them how
I
to
need to
do
learn
it.
display templates. I really do. I'm not a programmer. I don't know code, but I definitely need to figure that out because those out of the box things are just not sufficient. We are finding more and more of that. Anybody in the chat room finding that as well? Shout it out. Let us know your sort of trials and tribulations around that too. Love to hear it.
Absolutely. And so I started off with this control list.html. That's the list template that I was using. So if I open that up, unfortunately, Laura's right. Crazy developer stuff. It's all over the place in here. All this stuff, even the main piece of content right here. This is the main content that is displayed. This is all of it. So right here where it says CTX render groups and then CTX, that is the content that we're seeing. This is sort of a variable pulled from all the other stuff that is up in the green sections of the display template. So I'm with Laura. I'm working on those right now, and I'm trying to get a better explanation of how each one of these pieces works. But I can tell you, just from the little bit of editing that I've done, you'll have to learn some of these things like this CTX render groups. Anytime you see something like this, where you see underscore, pound, equal, in both directions, underscore, pound, equal, or pound, underscore, anything in between here is a JavaScript variable. So up in here, you will find where this has been assigned to something, or it'll be a default value. In this case, I believe this is a default value to some degree. And so you have to pull, let's see, publishing feature needs to be enabled to see the HTML files. Ah, yes, that is true. So someone mentioned in the questions section that you have to turn on the publishing features to use any of that. That's correct. So to use the display templates for the list or the search web part, you have to have the publishing features enabled. And unlike some of the things that people have done in the past, I've seen a lot of SharePoint farms where, I've seen a lot of SharePoint farms where people have enabled the publishing features and done a few things to change the look and feel of SharePoint, and then they will take them back out, or they'll turn off the publishing features. The libraries are created at that point, so if you have mapped a drive to it, those libraries will still be there, but it may not function correctly if you turn off the publishing features. The display templates will still be there, but you may have some trouble using them after you've turned off the publishing functions. So be careful about that, because it's something that a lot of companies do. They turn on publishing, make some changes, and then turn them back off so that they can get rid of some of the downsides of publishing. And that doesn't work so well with the search web parts.
Real quick, Stephen, we have a little app in here. It's called Showcase. It's looks like a little yellow price tag, and I put a link to the other Power Hour episode where Mark Watts did the whole Power Hour on display templates, and that is geared a little bit more toward the branding type of people.
Right.
And I also put a link in there to your previous Power Hour, just FYI, for the Search Center stuff, the part 1.
Right. Thank you. So when we go in here and we look at these are all basically the same information. I'm displaying the same information, just with different templates. So the only difference between list 2 and list is I went in and edited the template a little bit to kind of get an idea of exactly what it was doing. So come on, there we go. So I edited it with Notepad. And before, where this was all of the content, all I did was create what's called a div, and I changed the background color, and I put a red border around it, because I wasn't sure exactly how this content was being rendered. I wasn't sure if it was being rendered in one big block, or if it was being rendered one piece at a time and repeating 3 times. So I had it put it all in a red box with a aqua border, because I wanted to see if it was happening all at once or if it was doing one piece at a time, because I was curious about this, where it can show one item at a time, and this shows them all at once. The reason I was curious is because I have another project that I'm working on for using search to create a navigation piece where I create a bunch of links, and then it shows as a menu that you can choose from. That'll probably be 1 or 2 Power Hour presentations for me down the road. But I'm making progress on that, but I wanted to see how this stuff was displaying. But I learned a few things while I was setting this up.
Keep in mind, Steven's not a developer, so for those of you who might not know him, he's just figuring this stuff out. He's just digging in and kind of figuring out and translate it to us other non-developers.
Exactly, and that's why I'm not just doing a demo of, here's how to do X, Y, or Z, because I'm still figuring out myself. So as I'm piling through these things, I'm bringing the information to you guys, and some of you may be able to tell more about it than I can, but I just want to, share the information as it's presented to me, and then we can all work together on the project instead of just dumping a pre-done demo on you. So when I did this, I went and I created a library, or I guess you'd call it a library. And I put a title, a purpose, which is navigation, and that plays into what I'm going to use it for eventually, the navigation part that I was talking about. A URL, and that's where I eventually want the navigation to point people, and then an icon. So I thought that would be easy. I thought I would go and I would set up the search web part, and I would point it towards these items, and it would be simple. So I did just that. I went into edit the page, and I inserted a web part, and I'm going to choose this column right here because I have the least amount of stuff in it right now. And the web part we're working with is content search, and I added it. And I got something that looked a lot like that. that may be a little different than what I was looking for, or a little different than what I initially got, but it was what I expected to get, except I expected these to have the images in them. So I couldn't figure out exactly what I had done wrong. Then I thought more about it. And if I did the same thing, I go to Web Part, Content Rollup, Content Search, Add, and I do it here, I'll show you probably what I should have done. So if I edit the web part here, I have to do a query. And the basic queries are already sort of canned for you. I can do a query to look for all the documents in the system. I can do items matching a content type or a tag or to the current user. So I can do pages, pictures, items that are popular, things that are recently changed, but none of them were what I was really looking for initially. So I switched to advanced mode, and I did a local SharePoint result, and I selected a property, and I looked for a list item here, but I had to find the right query, and none of these were it at first. So if I look in the other list that I did, here's what I finally ended up with. Oh, no, it's not showing. And this is one of the bugs that I've found. Once you have the query, sometimes you get it lost. So when you go back in to see what you were querying, you can't find it anymore. So then you have to redo the query. So lesson number one I learned, copy down the queries that I use. In this case, I'll try and reconstruct it. So I had to go to the advanced mode. I wanted to search from local SharePoint. The query from the search box wasn't important because I'm not actually typing in a query anywhere. But I wanted to select a property, and you have to use what's called a managed property in SharePoint. And I'll show you in a minute what that means. But the managed property that I had created trying to find it now. Well, darn, I can't remember it. So let's go into search and we'll find it. And now I'll start talking about exactly what the managed properties are. Whenever you create a list item or a site column in SharePoint, it creates a property. And so these are the crawled properties. And normally, when it's new, it's something that you have created, it will add this OWS and then whatever the name of the property that you created. So I've created some different columns in the past. And then for this one, I created a column called Purpose. So I'm trying to find Purpose. OWS Purpose, right there. So I couldn't find that in my list. But if I go in and look again, now that I know it's called OWS Purpose, there's the managed property name of it, Purpose, and then contains value. And I set all the ones that I wanted to show up to navigation. And of course, oh, there it is. There's my Purpose. All right, so I messed that up.
Have you noticed that sometimes the options change in there after you save the web part and click OK and then open it again? Like different things will appear?
Absolutely, and that's, so there they are.
Like
so
the sorting tab doesn't exist when you first insert the web part, and then after you've saved it and go back in, then magically there's sorting. It's really
right,
odd.
and then the other thing is all of these things, so when I created the library, I had to do the crawl first before Purpose would show up here. So by doing that query, I can see now, well, let's see if it'll stick this time. Now it sticks. I can see the 3 items that I wanted. So the result source that I did, I had to create this navigation result source. I told it I wanted to pull from here, search term, so Purpose 1 OWS text. I don't even know where that came from, and I apologize, because like Laura said, sometimes when you go in, things are different than they were when you last left them. So I had to do this first. I had to create the result source, but I had to use this query. I tried to create this query directly in the search web part, but it wouldn't let me. So I had to create a result source, just like it tells me in the interface. So when I tried to program something in directly here, I couldn't get it to come up exactly the way I wanted it to. So it said I could select a result source. So I went in here and I did the query in the result source instead. So I did new result source. I gave it a name. I launched my query.
What exactly is a result source? I know I stepped away for a second. I don't know if I missed it.
Well, we hadn't gotten to it yet. So the result source is just a set of qualifiers. So it's like a query that you can feed into the navigation or into the search web part.
Oh, these are also the same little words that appear at the top when you're going to the search center and you see like people, conversations, videos across the top, like right under the search box?
They can be, yes.
Oh, cool. Okay. So, but you'd have to define the result source if you wanted to have it show in that area. That's where you'd define it, right?
That's where it can go either way. So you can either do a direct query inside of the web parts. You can ignore all the result sources. You can just do a simple one, or you can go to advanced and you can do something where it's local SharePoint results and you can do a direct query, or you can use a result source that's reusable. It's a query that you can plug in a whole bunch of different places.
That is good to know. I immediately think of stuff like company policies or like project sites or something that people like always want to go directly to. That's really neat to only have to define it in one place. Anybody else in the Q&A have ideas where you could use something like this to have a result source and use it in multiple places? Like shout it out, ask questions, participate.
So I realized I got that kind of confused because that's exactly what I did when I first did this. I went in, I tried to write the query directly, and then I forgot that I couldn't get the query to work exactly the way I wanted it to. So then I created a result source. So if I go to the result source, I have a very similar query builder. So query after all transformations. So that can be directly from the search box, or it can be after it's been run through several different queries together. So the result source doesn't necessarily have to be the end goal. It can be the starting point for the query that the search part uses. So I feed this query into the search web part, and then I can filter it down further with the search web part. So each one of those can be different as well. But I realized I went through all that work probably for not a lot of gain, because I could have done a much simpler query by editing the web part, doing a search query, and I could have looked for pictures in the current site, and I would have gotten the icons that I started with. And you can see they've got the names of them here. This is querying from a totally different place than this. This is the picture library. This is the Show Me library that I created that linked to the pictures. What I could have done is I could have made the pictures the original source and added the URL, added the purpose, and all of that to the pictures themselves, instead of putting the pictures in one library and connecting them to something else. If I had done that, I would have worked with a familiar type for the queries. The queries already look for pictures. And then I could have narrowed it down from there. So if I wanted just those 3 pictures, all I had to do was tell it I wanted pictures that were in this site, because I didn't have any other pictures uploaded. So that's why the current site. If I do all site collections, so I don't restrict it, I get a bunch from the other site collections. That's another important difference about the content search web part. It crosses site collection borders with no trouble. So the content query web part can't do that, but the search web part, because it uses the search index in the back end, it has access to all the information contained in the search. And it's in the search index. It's not the search for this site. Because if I look for things in this site with the search, I don't have this connected to my larger search engine. I just have it connected to the very simple search where it looks in the site only. So it's using the same engine, but it can't see the results from anywhere else because I haven't configured it in this site. But the search query web parts have access to the entire index in the background. And I would have probably had a much easier search job to do. As it was, I had to go and I had to create the result source and all the other stuff. But because I did that, I learned all of these different things that I could do, like doing the result sources. I still want to work on those queries to see if I can get it to work directly in the search, but having the result sources makes it really easy because then I can reuse those over and over again, and I can plug them into different pieces of SharePoint. And that's part of the search.
Since nobody's asking questions, Stephen, I'm going to jump in. Result sources, where can I define those? Can I define those in the global level, like in central admin, and also in site collections? Can I define those at the site level? Like where all can I do that?
Hang on just a second. Let me save the page here.
I'm pretty sure that it's central admin and a site collection. I'm just not sure how it goes, how far it goes below that. So for those of you who aren't a server admin and you don't have access to central admin and that type of thing, then you might be a site collection admin and you'd be able to do it there, et cetera, et cetera. Because we get a lot of people in these power hours who aren't, who don't have certain levels of access, who just might be a site manager.
So here are our result sources for the site. Then we have result sources for the site collection. If we go in and we look in central administration, if I find central administration down here, I can also define them at the farm-wide level. So I can do them at all three levels. And one of the reasons for this is because of the move towards cloud implementations of SharePoint. Some of this stuff has kind of been pushed down so that the users can do a little more self-service kind of work. In the past, result sources take the place of a few different things from 2010. It takes the place of federated locations, and it takes the place of search keywords, both of which were mostly administrated from central administration, and then they were sort of activated at the site collection level. So you had to create a scope in central administration, and then that scope you could pick up in site collections inside of SharePoint. Now you don't have to do that. You can create the result source at the site level, the site collection level, or at the farm level, depending on how likely it is to be reused. So if it's something that you're doing just for your own project, you can do it at the site level. But later, if somebody decides that your result type is really useful, they could recreate it up at the central administration level so that people could reuse it all over the farm. And that's true for a lot of stuff. So the query rules are the same way. Query suggestions, I believe, are still limited to the farm level, but I could be wrong about that one. I'd have to look. So a lot of this stuff has been moved down a level or two so that you can get to it with different kinds like collection admin. You can create it for the site collection, and then if you're a farm administrator, you can do it all the way at the top end. see. So there's not much more at this point that I wanted to demo other than the fact that all of these different things, only one of them is showing different information. It's just how you display that information that makes a difference. So on this page, I had to manipulate things a little bit more because it wasn't showing me the pictures that I wanted. So again, I had to go into the property mappings, and I had new managed properties that I had created when I did the search crawl. To cheat a little bit, I use site columns. When you create a site column, and we'll go to the custom site columns. I did the icon URL and I did the purpose, because when you do it as a site column, it automatically creates a managed property in search when you do your next search crawl. Trying to find central admin here. There we go. So when I go into search schema, I actually had to create two of them. Purpose, and it created this for me and connected it up to a managed property, OWS purpose.
What is a managed property, Stephen?
A managed property, gosh, that's a hard answer all in one lump. A managed property is the way you would hope the queries would work. You would hope that it would just search for a column. But SharePoint won't let you directly go to the column and address it as an item that's unique. So when you create a column or an item and you do the search crawl, SharePoint will create what's called a crawled property. A crawled property just means something that it's found. It has found this new item, and that item could be whatever you named a column when you created it. A managed property is when you connect that up to properties that SharePoint is already tracking directly. And those you can control. So if I do test, and it's just like a column in the different kinds of things that I can do, except for I can't do queries to other managed properties. And it means I can search for it if I set it to be searchable. And I can change the properties of how it's searched for. So I can use it as a full text index. And then this stuff starts to get kind of deep into things, as does the weighting group. I can give it a friendlier name by giving it an alias. So instead of like those OWS underscore things, I can give them more basic names. And then I can map it to a crawled property. So I can create a managed property out of anything that I've found inside of SharePoint, or any crawled property that already exists in SharePoint. And from then on, it can have that same identity. And I can actually map multiple things to it. So I can make one managed property represent a whole bunch of different columns and items as long as they're the same type inside of SharePoint. Is that a good answer? That's not really a good answer, is it?
Yes, sure. So while you were answering me,
okay,
I was doing something else. Shocker! I was creating a poll. So after after this session wraps up, I was looking through the Google Hangout to see if there was a poll app that existed. I didn't see one, but I created this poll on polleverywhere.com. So I'm actually going to poll you guys who are watching SharePoint Power Hour with a few topics that I threw out there for just a multiple choice poll. So I'm gonna do that. I guess just be sure and leave a couple minutes after you wrap up. So y'all stick around.
All right. So I'm wrapping up at this point. I mean, I know that the presentation was kind of scattered, but so was my research. And this is the same kind of process that you guys are going to go through when you're doing these new web parts. The things to remember are work with the stuff that SharePoint already knows. So managed properties are the only way that you can really do those queries. You can't do it just based on a column name directly. So you go in and you look at the queries and you think, oh, well, this is going to be easy because I'm just going to search for, anything that has this value in a query. But you can see here, I've only got a few canned things in the easy one. And then when I switch to the advanced mode, I actually have fewer options than I did in the simple mode. And that's because it only works with the managed properties. So when I look at show all managed properties, I have to have a managed property, which is a property that SharePoint is already keeping track of somehow. That's the only stuff that I can build these queries off of. So I can't just fly at it, create a column with any name, and then expect it to work. I have to map it to something, or it has to be mapped for me. So that's one of the advantages of the site columns, is if you create a site column, it automatically maps it to a managed property. So I'll be showing you guys more as I go through the rest of this. Hopefully, as I get better and better at it, it'll get more focused and I'll be able to give you more direct, like, here's exactly how it should be done. But as it is, sometimes I go in and the queries have all changed on me. And like Laura said, some of this stuff is not super stable in terms of what it displays. You can go in here and the query will work, but then when you go in to do like refiners, stuff won't be showing up right here. There won't be a sort option in some of the queries. There is a sort option in some of the other queries. So even though the query builders look the same from piece to piece, they aren't always exactly identical. Any other questions? Nope.
What's the coolest
What's
thing?
the coolest thing?
Search web parts, Cassie.
I'm trying to think. The coolest thing, and most of the time it's not something that I have done, but I think the coolest things that I have seen done, I have seen people do a lot of things that in the past they would have needed to do a custom web part entirely. So using the display templates, I've seen some pretty cool like image libraries where instead of it being like a slideshow or something, it was interactive. Like you could flip through things manually. You could hit like a button and it would go to the next image, go to the next image. I've seen them where people have put search terms at the top, and then when you enter it in, it pulls that search term into the web part, and then it displays pictures or documents or anything like that. So I've seen some document control stuff where it uses like a document ID. You put in the document ID and it just shows you all the things that match that document ID without having to go to a search page. It's just a web part in the middle of the page where you can feed information to it through a query line, but then it goes through the web part And normally that would have taken full-on custom development in 2010, but now it's simple to do.
Awesome. All right. Thanks. Let's see. So thanks, Kessie, for asking a question. Any last questions, just let us know. We'll go ahead and wrap it up, though. I did create a little poll. So I shared it on the little yellow showcase app in here that says, what should the next Power Hour topic be? And I put like 4 things out there. And I also just tweeted it out. It's so click on the link, and I see like 3 people have voted already. So we've got key performance indicators, or InfoPath. We had someone bring up last time InfoPath querying SharePoint list data. I put cross-site publishing, and I put information management policies. Information management policies are very cool. Not enough people know what they are, I think, to know they would want to see a demo on it, but just saying. So again, I'm Laura Rogers and our team at Rackspace Hosting, where we do have hosted SharePoint. See us again next week, same time, same place, Wednesday at 11 Central, and whatever you guys vote for, I'll give it, probably another day at least for this poll to get more responses, but whatever you guys vote for, that's what we'll do. And let's see, any other announcements? Oh, SP TechCon, the SharePoint Technology Conference, was just last week, and the next one is coming up really soon. It's in February, so it's sptechcon.com. And it's going to be really exciting. The next Microsoft conference is going to be in May, and they haven't announced what they're going to be calling it yet, but it's going to be a huge merge of the SharePoint conference and TechEd and the Exchange conference and the Link conference and like all these different products at separate conferences. So now we're going to do one big giant one, and I was lucky enough to get invited to be on a Microsoft roundtable event. I just got back last night, but that's where I was earlier this week, where they actually asked our feedback. So some influencers in the community, they got together and just asked us a bunch of questions about things we would like to see in a conference. So that was really exciting. I'll blog about that. But thanks everybody for coming, and please vote on the poll. If you can't see it in here, click the little yellow link, and if you can see it in there, go to Twitter. I'm at WonderLaura, so if you can find that tweet where I posted the link to vote. Thanks, everybody. Signing out.